evening. How's everybody tonight? Good to see you all. We have a very special guest with us to start us off this evening. It is Dr. Jim Burton. He is former dean of the Jones College of Business here, so we have been very fortunate that we had his leadership here for quite a number of years and led us through some very interesting and challenging times and helped us really grow our programs here at the Jones College. And he is teaching in our Department of Accounting now, and he has agreed to speak to you all tonight. He has continuously served on several boards. One of those is Piedmont Natural Gas. He is currently the financial expert, and so he's going to tell us what it means to be on a board, what it means to be a financial expert. He, in addition to his service at Piedmont, has served on other committees and enterprises such as the Chair of the Finance and Enterprise Risk Management Committee of Piedmont. He served on Leadership Middle Tennessee. He was one of the founding directors, members of the first class of this prestigious regional leadership organization. Many of you may have heard of Leadership, the Burton Leadership Middle Tennessee. He served on the board of directors of the Workforce Investment Board, Area 9. He completed 2 terms on the board of directors of the Rutherford County Chamber of Commerce. He served on a board and executive committee of the Business Education Partnership of Rutherford County. He served on the directors of Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America, the Tennessee chapter. He served on the board executive committee of the Middle Tennessee Council of Boy Scouts of America. He served on the board of directors as vice chair and chair of the pension committee of the Murfreesboro Electric Department. He has served on the board and vice chair of the Jennings and Rebecca Jones Foundation, served as president of the Southern Business Administration Association, and received the certified director designation from the John E. Anderson Graduate School of Management at UCLA. And he has held both a CPA and a certified fraud examiner's license until he went inactive with those fairly recently. So I think he's well qualified tonight to tell us and to lead us in our discussion of the board of directors, the structure, what committees do, and what risk management is all about. So let's welcome our guest, and let him come up. And
thank you, Dr. Benson. I appreciate that. This is the board of directors at Piedmont Natural Gas, or at least until we made a few changes. Not that anybody needed to go away except Mr. Harwell, who's here, a very prominent attorney in Nashville, was on the board until he reached what's called mandatory retirement age. So he cycled off last March, and we have added since then Mr. Gary Garfield. Gary is the president and CEO of Bridgestone Firestone, Bridgestone Americans. He's come on to our board, and we just added a gentleman who is the president, chief executive officer of Pinehurst Golf Resorts in South Carolina to the group as well. So that's it's a pretty good group. We've got a lot of folks in there. Vicki McElreath was a partner in an accounting firm. Mac Everett was a banker. Minor Shaw is the chairman of the board of the Duke Endowment, and if you're from the Carolinas, the Duke Endowment is a big deal. Frank Holding and his family own First Citizens Bank. You look First Citizens Bank out of Raleigh, North Carolina. It is a big bank. In fact, he has branches in Nashville as well. Tom Skanes in the center is the president and chairman of the board of Piedmont Natural Gas, been in the gas business most of his career. Frankie Jones has an extraordinary career. He was an Air Force officer. He has been a consultant to a whole range of folks, and in his spare time he is getting a second doctorate from Cambridge, and also does a lot of farming. Phil, right beside him, was in the transmission gas business until he retired, and he's enjoying his grandchildren a lot more now. David Shai was the former president at Furman University and is enjoying retirement and writing history books. Joanne Sanford is an attorney. She was formerly a regulator in North Carolina with the Utilities Commission, And Michael Tarwater heads up the Carolina healthcare system, which is a huge, huge healthcare system. So very prestigious board. Now, our board very much operates on a committee structure. We delegate as much authority through the committees as possible. That doesn't mean the responsibility goes away from the board. It just means that we can get a lot more work done in small groups. So we have a governance committee that looks after how we do affairs, looks after how we get the board together, looks after making sure that we are in compliance with the things that we need to do from the SEC point of view and so forth. We have an audit committee which is chaired by Vicki McElreath. Vicki and I are considered the financial experts. You have to have designated financial experts. I don't know if that scares them, but it just scares the crap out of me that I'm supposed to be a financial expert for a New York Stock Exchange listed company, because there is just so much that goes on all the time. To think that someone is an expert in all of that is a daunting task. But the board basically designates, according to their rules, who they think are financial experts and submits that information to the SEC for their concurrence. And what that basically means is that if something goes wrong, they come to us first. So when the shots get fired, I'm at the head of the line. I guess I get to fall first, but Vicki McElreath is really an excellent chair of the audit committee. Does a great job, very, very thorough job. So I'm hopeful that all of that together helps keep us out of the line of fire very much. We also have, and we'll talk a lot more about this, the Finance and Enterprise Risk Management Committee. It was just the Finance Committee for a long time and really didn't have a lot to do because we didn't have to do a lot of financing for the company for most of the early years. But as the concept and the concern about risk got greater, the board kept trying to figure out where does the responsibility for risk in this company belong? And how do we monitor that risk? And how do we know where it is? And how do we be sure that we're covering it? And so they, through the governance committee, decided that there should be an enterprise risk committee. Enterprise being the overall look. And I was asked to chair that committee. I think that's one of those, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I was the one who kept complaining that we needed that committee. And so if you complain that you need it, you eventually get it. Plus, one of the gentlemen who retired from us, Johnny Harris, had been the chair of that committee, and he left us. He, of course, left the committee. So that spot was open. Any questions about Piedmont in general? Piedmont services Davidson County in Tennessee. That's about where only place we have, but we have almost all of Davidson County in Tennessee. And then we have a lot of North Carolina and the upstate part of South Carolina is where we operate. So we are a regulated utility. You understand what regulated utility means? Well, it means we're sort of a monopoly where we are, but we're a monopoly that is under the watch care of the state regulatory commissions. So they get to tell us where we're going to put lines or not put lines, and how much we can charge for what we do, and we are very responsible to them for making sure that the customers are happy. Now, the nice part of being a regulated utility is that you get to know what rates you can charge, and you get to know pretty well how much you can make on your assets. So there is an upside to being regulated in that there's a little bit less risk in terms of what your revenue source and revenue stream is going to be. If the commission approves, when you submit the appropriate documentation, if they approve the assets that you have invested in, for us that would be lines in the ground, going to homes and down roads and so forth, and compressor stations that are necessary, that sort of thing. If they approve that, which they don't do in advance, but if they approve that, then those assets go into our rate base. And they tell us what we can earn on our rate base. And if we are not earning that, then we have an opportunity to change those rates to get our returns up. So being a regulated utility has advantages. Disadvantages, there's an awful lot of paperwork and getting before the commission that you have to do to get there. But it is, and we also have some non-regulated businesses. If you're in the gas business, as we are, for example, what's the busiest time of year if you're in the natural gas business? Winter? Summer? See, I got conflicting opinions up here.
All the
Sometime.
time. All the time.
Well, until recently, winter would have been right, because most of the time it's a heating issue that you think of natural gas. And so in the cold months, you expect to be using a lot of gas, and in the warm months, you expect the utilization to be down. But things have changed. With the emphasis on the environment, a lot of the electric generating plants, which were coal-fired, burn coal, are no longer considered appropriate or efficient, and so they've switched those plants over to natural gas. And so with that switch over to natural gas, there are days in the summertime when the throughput of gas, when the amount of gas that we're actually passing through our system to our customers will be higher on a hot summer day than it is on winter, because it's being used to generate electricity. So it's not the most efficient use of natural gas is direct when we burn it for heat, but it is still more efficient than coal and oil and some other sources, even when we have to burn that gas and produce electricity to create the energy that's being used. It's a great source. It's very of the sources available to us now, it is the lowest carbon emission source. And the good part about that is it's also pretty readily available. Have you heard of the Marcellus shale gas? Maybe not. Most of the gas that we have had for ever and ever, in my recollection, comes out of the Gulf, in the Gulf region. But not too long ago, and they discovered huge gas deposits in Pennsylvania and Virginia, mostly in Pennsylvania, but in that area, in what's called the Marcellus region. It's in shale down underneath, and they have determined ways to extract that gas, a little bit different than they do it in the Gulf, but still it comes out. So the abundance of natural gas is much greater than we would have thought 5 or 10 years ago, because they have found these new deposits that are, and they can get to them. Now the issue with that is that part of the way that they get to them is through a process that's called fracking. And if you've heard the word fracking, you probably heard it in a negative context. Fracking essentially means that they drill down and get to a certain point, and then they turn horizontal with the drill, and it goes this way. And they have to create pressure through the rock to drive that gas out. Well, part of that's done with a slurry like mud. It's like mud, but it's not exactly mud. It is an environmentally safe product that they use, but sometimes if you're drilling underground through porous rock and you're putting pressure, pumping a semi-liquid of mud into that, some of that mud is going to come back up through the cracks in the rock and come to the top of the ground. And so there's been some concerns about that, concerns about whether it, in fact, damages water tables and so forth. The studies on that so far are pretty favorable, but not entirely favorable. They're not. The folks who are strong environmentalists don't want anything done. Problem with that is we're going to run out of energy fairly quickly if we don't do something. We're not going to get to wind and solar fast enough to solve the problem. So in the meantime, we've got to do something. And this seems to be, for the short term, at least a reasonable way to do it. So we do have an abundant supply of natural gas, and that's good for all of us. Okay, any thoughts or questions that you have about the company in general, about the board of directors, before I'll take off and we'll take a look at the enterprise risk issues a little bit more.
Well,
Yes, sir.
it's not exactly about board of directors or anything, but you mentioned, wind power and being able to get to that. Do you think that it could ever be sustainable, or ever generate enough to
Is it sustainable? The answer to that is yes. Is it likely to ever be sufficient to meet the needs? The answer to that's probably no. I visited my nephew who lives up in Wisconsin last summer, and from his front porch I could look down at about a line of about 15 giant wind turbines. Well, that's great, and they were doing a good job, but they're not. I don't know where you're ever going to put enough of those to create the kind of energy that you need. Solar is great. It wouldn't be real good right now.
Right.
But many days it does really well. So will a combination of those things help solve the problem? The answer to that is yes, and we should be doing that. We should have been doing it for a long time, more than we have. But part of that is it has to be economic, and right now the economics of it doesn't work. The only way the economics work at the moment is through government subsidies. Is that all bad? No, if it's in the development stages, we probably ought to do that. That's part of the research to get there. And somebody will find something else. I don't know what that is, but there are a lot of smart people out there working on the problem, so something else is going to come up. But in the meantime, you still have to keep putting the lights on, and I don't know about you, but I really like air conditioning.
Because I read somewhere, I guess it was close to a year ago now, that I think, I don't know if it was the combined statistic or if it was just wind, but it was like less than 0.4% or something is what it contributes.
Yeah, it's a very small amount. I don't know what that number is, but it's a very small amount at this stage. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a compliance committee? Because I'm assuming with natural gas or standards that you must adhere to?
We have compliance officers in the company. We don't have a compliance committee per se on the board of directors, but through our governance committee, they oversee the compliance group within the management team to make sure that we stay in compliance with all the things that we have to do. Yes, we do have compliance, and compliance is in a regulated utility is really broad because we've got all of the compliance issues that Apple has, from government compliance for financial reporting, SEC compliance, New York Stock Exchange compliance, all of those kind of compliance issues. Plus, we have all the compliance issues that go along with the regulated part of it and the utility part of it. We have compliance. Lots of it. Sandy?
You're talking about of course, the environmental concerns, and those are a big deal now. And we are talking in this course about shareholder rights and maximizing shareholders, but then there's stakeholder interests today. How do you weigh and balance the concerns and decide what the right course of action is?
And that's always a huge problem. I mean, for most of the history of this country, shareholder value was the dominating force for boards of directors. Your job was to maximize shareholder value. And that meant getting the price up, getting the dividends up, doing what you needed to do, making profit. And in case you haven't looked, profit is not a four-letter word. It's still okay to make money, I think. But I think you have to be conscious, not only because the government's requiring you to be conscious of these other issues, but your customers are concerned about those things. We do, and we may get to that in the enterprise risk and the reputational part. We do surveys on a regular basis of our customers to see how we're doing, to see what they think of us, to see how they're perceiving the things that we're doing, to make sure that that we're running down the right road. We have shareholders we have activist shareholders sometimes who will come in with specific agendas and they want to know, how are you doing about this, that, or the other? Have you invested here or invested there? One of the things that we're doing now, we are in two joint ventures building pipelines out of this Marcellus shale that I talked about. One of the pipelines will run from Pennsylvania into upstate New York, and the other one will run through Virginia and back down into the Carolinas to deliver that available gas. Upstate New York desperately needs the energy. They don't have sufficient energy for the numbers of people that they've got in cold winters and so forth. So they desperately need the energy. But there are certainly groups that think that no pipelines should be built anywhere. is just environmentally bad. And you ought not to do that. Now, apparently they don't live in upstate New York. But a lot of folks from Montana don't want you to build pipelines into New York. And New Yorkers are not quite so much concerned about that as some of the other folks. It is our responsibility to be very, very careful. We built a line not long ago, maybe 2 years ago now, in Nashville that ran through the Radnor Lake area. There wasn't any other place to go with it. It was to replace an existing line that was old and bad. But in order to do that, you've got to disturb ground. You can't put pipe under the ground. Even if you drill it, you're still going to disturb ground. And so we had the ranger from the Radnor Park area, and we had environmentalists. But you heard very little in the newspaper or anywhere else about what was going on out there, because we were very conscious of what we were doing. We were very conscious of how, Mr. Harwell's home is right around Radnor Lake. His backyard almost backed up to the pipeline, so he was very concerned that this all be done well and kept a good eye on it. Did we have a problem? Yeah, we had one instance where the mud oozed up and it got into a little feeder creek. Didn't go very far. We got stopped. We got it blocked off. We got it taken out of there, and we found another way to do what we had to do to get through there. So the environmental issues continue to be something that we're concerned about, but you don't make omelets without cracking some eggs, as they say. If you're going to dig pipelines, you're going to crack some ground open. Other questions? Well, let me talk to you specifically about the enterprise risk management, and Dr. Benson's going to help me here with some of that. So I'm not accustomed to being up here with all of my stuff back there, so I'm going to have to be turning around and playing with you here. This is the framework for enterprise risk management that we work from, and you see that at the very top, the board of directors, we have the policy responsibility for the company to establish what the right policies are. We don't have to operate day to day. It's not our job to operate day to day. We pay an executive management team to do that, but we have to oversee it. The RMC is what it is the acronym for the Risk Management Advisory Committee. That's members of the management team who serve on this committee to help oversee things. The EMT is the executive management team, and then we do have a chief risk officer. His name is Rob Pritchard, and he is a very, very good guy. He and his team have worked really hard at helping to develop this process. Our first line of defense are the people who are in the field, what we call the business owners, the folks who own the piece of business where the risk develops. They are managers of that piece of the business. So they're the ones who are going to see risk first. They're going to have to deal with the risk first. They're the first line of defense. The second line of defense is the executive team, risk management team, and their job is to oversee each of these business owners, so they catch it. Then second, and then our internal audit is sort of the third line of defense. So we've staged this up to say we should have different people at different levels scoping the risk as it develops. Our vision statement for this area says that we want to develop a risk management framework that provides transparency, that everybody can see the risk that we assume in pursuit of our vision, our mission, and our values. So the first thing is, let me ask you a question. Can you operate a business without risk? I don't think so. I don't think you could do it very long, because if you operate without risk, I don't think you could make any money. And it would go away pretty fast. So the first thing is you got to know that you have risk. Now, how much risk are you willing to take? Well, it's that great answer. It depends. Is all risk the same in all areas? Is it the same? And what we'll show you here in a few minutes is we've developed, in our view of this, 7 categories of risk within our company. And we don't think that that we're willing to assume the same level of risk in all 7 of those categories. For example, when it comes to the safety of our people, our risk appetite is as low as we can get. We don't want to take risks with the safety of our people, ever. Do we have accidents? We absolutely do. That's the risk that goes on. You know, people fall and sprain ankles or have car accidents or whatever. But to the extent that we can prevent that, we're going to take as little risk as we can possibly get in that area. When we look at it, we think that this really starts at the top of an organization. And the tone that you set at the top of the organization comes through that organization, and then people gravitate and understand that, and they will behave according to what they understand the senior management to believe and practice. Just saying it won't do it. If they don't see you practicing it on an everyday basis, it won't work. So we look to build a really strong risk management and control culture. Now, control, not to stifle things, but to be able to be sure that we're staying within the policy framework. We have set the appropriate tone at the top. We offer clear expectations. We try to promote awareness of where we're trying to go. We make sure that people understand who has the ownership of things, and we foster the appropriate behavior and accountability. And we're trying always to make sure that people are conscious of the risks they're taking. So the transparency is to get it out in front of them, to let them see the risk and understand what risks we're willing to take and then how much risk we're actually taking. So we put in a structure that promotes good corporate governance, clearly defines risk-taking responsibility and authority, and promotes the ownership and accountability for that risk. Sandy, next one, please.
What was the RMAC? I'm sorry, off to the left side.
That's our Risk Management Advisory Committee. And they are sort of the managed lower level, not the executive level team, but they're some of the lower level business owners in the business, managers and directors. So when we look at our risk appetite, we have a criteria for the risk category selection, and each of those risk categories has a definition. It has the subtopics, what the objectives are, and the risk appetite statement. For each of our 7 risk categories, we put a number beside it to indicate the level of risk. Number 1 is we are risk averse. We don't want any risk. We want as little risk as possible. Up to a 5, which says bring it on. We're willing to take the risk because the profit is there. We don't have any 5s. Okay. And our 7 categories of risk are over here. The first is strategic risks, risk associated with our inorganic growth. Well, inorganic growth, which would be joint ventures, be other than customers buying gas, homeowners buying gas, or industries buying gas through our transmission lines. Inorganic growth, I started to say a while ago, some of the things that we have, for example, we have gas storage. Okay? You buy gas sometimes when it's cheap and you store it, and then you use it if you have emergency situations, over usages or whatever. Well, where do you store a lot of natural gas?
Tanks.
Underground, in caves. So you have to have appropriate territory where this gas can be housed, if you will, can be pumped into, and it'll stay there until you need to pump it back out. So we have some storage facilities. We have a partnership with Atlanta Gas and Light, I believe is what it's called. And that partnership is called South Star, because Georgia deregulated some of their utilities. And so we got into this business with Atlanta Gas Light and deregulated gas. As it turns out, Atlanta Gas Light was just sold to the Southern Company, which is a huge electric down in Florida. And so there's some change going to happen. There was a risk. When you're in a partnership with somebody else, if they get sold, the partnership changes. And so we're in the process of having to figure out how that partnership is going to change and where we're going to go with it. So those are the inorganic kinds of things that it's talking about. Acquisitions of joint ventures, management of our overall business mix and risk. Commercial risk, those things which we do in the normal course of business, buying and selling gas in the transmission pipelines and so forth. Market risk are those things which are outside our control, the external risks that are outside our control. So the economy in 2008 was a market risk. It was outside of our control, but it made a huge difference. I mean, we were running at about an 8% growth rate of customers, and that 8% growth rate went to about 2%. So it was a pretty significant change. Nothing we did, nothing we could do about it. It's coming back, beginning to build back at the stage of the game, but those are the market kinds of risks. Financial risk, those associated with day-to-day operations as well, long-term growth initiatives. So financial risk, what happens when we go to borrow money? Right now, if you're in the commercial paper market, that's overnight, very short-term borrowing, and with really good credit, and we have really good credit, you might be able to borrow money for less than 1/4 of 1%. 1/4 of 1%. Now, the Federal Open Market Committee is scheduled to meet in the next few days. I don't know what the day is exactly. But they've made noises now for quite some time that they're going to raise the rates that they charge. And rates follow what they do. So if they do that, there's a market risk for us. Our interest costs are going to go up. Recognizing that, then maybe you get into the market sooner than you otherwise would have anticipated, borrow some money a little earlier than you would have thought, in order to alleviate some of that risk and some of that cost. Operational risk, that's the stuff that we do on a day-to-day basis. If you drive down the road and you look over, there's these pipes sticking up out of the ground, and it's 900 degrees outside, and there's ice on the pipes. You ever see those? Why is there ice on the pipes when it's that hot outside? Because they're under huge pressure. They're under huge pressure. And so that pressure creates potential risk. No matter how careful you are, no matter how often you inspect it, something could happen. And so we have operational risk associated with that. Reputational risk. There was an explosion of a gas line out in California a few years ago. Pretty good sized explosion, and it did a lot of damage to property, and it killed some people. Well, we're in the gas business, and that was a gas explosion, so there was a reputational risk to us that we're going to be lumped into. Gas companies are not doing what gas companies are supposed to do to keep people safe. Now, most of the ruptures in gas lines are caused by what?
Old pipes.
Contractors digging across the lines without calling 811 and getting somebody to come out and locate where the line is. By far, most of the ruptures to gas lines are caused by, not by us, or not by rust, or not by, it's caused by somebody putting a trencher down across the line. How do you avoid that? That's an after the fact. You didn't avoid the problem, you just got paid for fixing the problem after the problem existed. But if there was an explosion, and there could well be, you're scraping through metal, that creates sparks. Gas is pretty flammable, so there could certainly be a problem with that. That doesn't, no matter how much you charge them, doesn't change the reputational issue that you've got to deal with. Yes, sir.
Is there a standard depth that pipes are buried at? Just
it will depend on which kind of pipes and how big the pipes are, because the transmission pipes can be like this, or they can be like this. The pipes that go to your house are like so. So there's a difference in where they're going to be. Part of that also depends on what you're going through. It's when I finished my master's work, I didn't have a job until the fall. Finished in spring, didn't have a job until the fall. So I worked for a gas company in Kentucky, and I buried pipeline. Well, we were in a place where you could, it wasn't Tennessee. You could get down into soil. And so you could put the trencher down and dig almost straight down. Here, you may do that for a foot, and then the next 100 feet may be solid rock. So it partially depends on how big the pipe is and where you are, what you can get through. I'm sure there are some standards. I'm not familiar with what they are for the different size pipe. And then regulatory risk. I think we have excellent regulatory relations in the 3 states in which we operate. The commissions in all 3 of those states are very reasonable people. They're very thorough people. That's not to say that they give us anything. We have to go in and make our case. But they have always been very reasonable people to deal with for us, and so we think our regulatory risk is lower than some companies that operate in a lot of other places where those commissions are a bit different. Sandy, let's see what's next. So what do? First of all, we have to assess it. We do this on a quarterly basis. Each quarter, Rob Pritchard, our chief risk officer, gives me a call about a week before our board meeting, and he sends me some materials like this. That's part of what you'll see coming up. And I go through it, and then he and I talk about it, make any conversation about where there have been changes, what the problems are. This will mean that before it gets to me, that this risk advisory committee has sat down with all the metrics that we have. For all of those 7 categories, we have some very defined, very specific targets, and each one of them have measurable things that they look at. So all of these things are quantified. Now, is everything always quantifiable? No, you'll see that we also have the opportunity to change some of that by subjective measurement. The executive team can look at it and say, you know what, the numbers aren't telling the full story. There's something that just isn't figuring in there. So that's the subjective appraisals that come in from the risk advisory committee or the executive management team. Quarterly reporting, and then they do to the board, to us on the committee, and then the board of directors gets an annual review of the same thing that we do. Okay. And that's sort of just a flow of how it works. The assessment goes through the objective metrics and some subjective appraisals. They justify what they've done. They identify any emerging risks. Is anything going on that we haven't been looking at in the past? Has something changed? Something now coming on the horizon that's different? One of the things that's been rising up on our scope is cyber risk. We're increasingly concerned about the possibility of somebody hacking into our system. Now, what could they do? Well, they could get customer information. We're pretty careful about what kind of customer information we keep. We've tried to make sure we don't have any personally identifiable information on customers that we don't absolutely have to have. But they might also be able to hack in and get into some of our control systems and operate valves and other things that change the pressure in the pipelines and so forth. So we're very concerned about cyber risk, and that's been a growing concern. The EMT, once the risk management advisory committee looks at it, then the executive team looks at it, makes any changes, and it comes to the committee and then to the full board. Okay. And so this is sort of what the where we are at the moment in terms of our first look at things. In terms of strategic risk, you see that our risk appetite is a 4. That's where we have the most appetite for risk. We think that when you're taking strategic initiatives, there's risk associated. When you're doing something you've never done before, like one of those pipelines I talked about, that's more risky than the everyday business that we're in. And the only way you can do that is if you have an appetite to take a bit more risk. Right now, we believe that we're well within our risk appetite. That the risk that we're taking is well under what we think we would be willing to do. However, we're very cautious that particularly those new things, for example, the pipelines, do create that risk for us, and we monitor that very, very carefully. Are we on budget for those things? Are we encountering more opposition to the building of those pipelines than we anticipated? Are we getting slower response for whatever permits that we need? The kinds of risks that we take. So we're well within our risk area. The commercial risk, once again, it's down a little. It's about 3, and we think we're at about 2.5 based on the metrics that we have, and we'll see some of those metrics in a minute. So overall, you can see that we kind of step down as we go, and we take over here in operational and reputation and regulatory, our risk is pretty low. We don't want any risk with our people. We don't want any risk with our reputation, and we're very cautious with our regulatory bodies because they control us, our lifelines. If they start telling us no, things get bad in a hurry. So we try to keep with them all the way. So this is sort of where our appetites are, and where overall we think we are within the framework of what we have established to do. Any questions there?
I see that the operational risk is higher than what's budgeted for. Is there a reason for that? Operational risk?
Yeah, good point. The operational risk, you're right. The operational risk is a little high. Is there a reason for that? Part of the reason, we see some of the metrics, I think that part of the reason for that is we have had a series of accidents, mostly vehicle accidents, for some reason. And those metrics will begin to drive those numbers up a little bit. So we're having more problem in that area than we want, and it will grab a lot of attention. For example, among the things that does, when we start seeing vehicle accidents and that risk moving, one of the things that it did, we started looking at our insurance. Do we have the right level of insurance? Do we have the right kind of coverage of that insurance? And do we have the right kind of insurance on our people to make sure that if they are hurt, they're well taken care of? Okay?
So who makes those recommendations? Does your chief risk officer come to the committee and say?
Chief risk officer comes to our committee with the whole package, which is about the size of what I handed you, Sandy, and we will go through that, and my committee will wear you out with questions, which is absolutely what they're supposed to do. And they will question what's going on, and they will make suggestions, and then the executive team is required to figure out and follow up on that. Yes.
Look at a what-if scenario, and it kind of falls into regulatory risk. Let's say the government approaches you and says, based off various factors, the highest price you can charge is X. But say that number is below any sort of break-even figure to the point where you're funding the loss. Is there any sort of agreement in place that limits what they can make you charge to what extent they can lower that price? I'm sure that's never happened, but.
I'm unaware of anything specific there, but I'm unaware either that it simply isn't economic for them to make us charge a rate where we can't cover our costs and make a profit, because people won't stay in business. And the regulatory commission wants you to be fair, but they also want customers served. So if we couldn't make money, we'd have to go out of business and the customers wouldn't be served. So I can't envision a scenario where that would be likely to happen.
Are you like some of the companies that once you make a certain amount of profit that you have to put in a pool to improvements or the actual certain
They,
times in that?
they can, if we quote, make too much money, then they can change our rate structure, or they can have us provide a rebate back to customers. So that you might, and that usually is, if you have to rebate back to customers, that usually has to do with the reduction in bills in the future. So you get an amount and then you have to reduce that bill. And that's good, but one of the problems with doing it that way is sometimes the customer doesn't realize that they're getting something back. You know, they just realize, well, I didn't use as much gas. Well, you used as much gas, but you're getting the rebate back, so your net charge is less. So we accept the fact that it costs money to write the checks and send them out and do all that. You know, personally, I guess if I had my way, I'd rather send them a check, because when they get that check in their hand, they go, oh, money from the gas company. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
So what would make shareholders want to invest if there's sort of a cap on what you can earn?
We are, how can I say this? We appeal to very conservative investors who are dividend oriented. Okay? We have paid a dividend every quarter for more than 30 years. So stockholders know now nobody has to pay a dividend, so we next quarter we might not pay a dividend. There's no guarantee of that, but history suggests that we're going to do that. And certainly the market would treat us badly if we didn't pay a dividend in a quarter after that expectation. But so we appeal to that kind of a shareholder, the person who's going to buy the stock, who's going to hold the stock, wants it for the income off the dividends that they get. We do not. It's not a huge trading stock. People don't speculate in it a lot. It's considered a safe haven when the market. It's kind of counter to the market. When the market starts going down, people start coming to us, and when the market starts getting good in the other areas, they start going away from us. So we have some volatility that's due to the market because of that. Some of it we can never do. We can't explain why that happens from anything that we're doing. It's just explained by the fact that the market's changing around us. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
This might be a personal question, and answer however you may. But is there a stock requirement for board members?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Almost all boards have a requirement that the board members hold some amount of stock, and that usually is a percentage or a multiple of the retainer that they pay the board member. I think, if my memory serves me correctly, because the governance committee has changed some of this recently, I believe ours is 5 times the retainer. And so the idea is we want shareholders to know that the members of the board have a financial interest in the company as well, and that if things go badly, we suffer as well as they do. And shareholders want to know that. They want to know that we're invested. So the single largest part of my portfolio of investments is in Piedmont Natural stock, Piedmont Natural Gas. If you go to finance professors and they looked at my portfolio, they would say, you need to diversify. But that's one of those cases where I'm as diversified as I can get, given that I'm going to remain on this board and I'm committed to this company.
So you have to realign as the stock price changes? Actually,
my wife and I met with our advisors on Tuesday and looked at the rest of the portfolio, which it doesn't take very long, by the way. That's not a huge job to look at the rest of my portfolio, but to do exactly that, to realign. And we were sort of out of balance because of that, and so we sold some stock, some stuff, and moved to other areas.
So while we're on this topic, how do they check you for conflicts of interest to ensure that they're complying with the SEC and New York Stock Exchange rules?
First of all, we sign conflict of interest statements. Every year we have to say that we know that. The other thing is I get a sheet, I get a package towards the end of the year before the annual meeting in March. It's about 15 pages long, full of questions that I have to answer, a lot of which have to do with conflicts of interest. And I have to list all the members of my family out some ways. That tree gets fairly wide, and whether or not any of them own stock in Piedmont. And you know, I don't even speak to some of them, so I don't know whether they own Piedmont or not. They don't speak to me. Not that we're upset with each other; we just don't see each other at all. But yes, there are ways that they check. There are blackout periods having to do with boards of directors meetings, for example. Before and after a board meeting, for a period of time, we cannot transact in our own stock at all, buy it or sell it. Our president, Mr. Skanes, his portfolio was very heavily oriented towards Piedmont stock, way too heavily for his own personal good. And so we as a board had to have some conversations about what can we allow him to do legally to diversify his holdings somewhat. And there are some provisions that are available. But what he basically had to do was say, okay, I'm going to sell some Piedmont stock, but it's essentially a trust. I'm going to sell it. It's going to sell on this day of the month regardless. Okay? And I'm going to sell it every second Tuesday of the month. I'm going to sell X numbers of shares of stock. If the stock is up, I do good. If the stock is down, I get hammered. But he couldn't, once he made that commitment, he couldn't maneuver it or control it so that he didn't have a conflict. Does that make sense? What we were trying to do and what we were trying to allow him to do.
Why were you concerned with his too much of a holding?
Just because from a personal financial standpoint, anybody as heavily weighted as he was, it was out of balance.
So he could have made short-term decisions to his benefit, potentially?
He's been with us for quite a while and received a lot of compensation in stock and some retained, what's the word I want? We want to retain him, so we give him some incentives. Retaining incentives. So his numbers of his value of his stock has just gone up, and in the holding of that stock over time, the value of it's gone up fairly substantially. We got out of balance, but we had to find a specific way that we could do that and allow him to do it. Other questions? Y'all are good. Next one, please. So some of the emerging risks that we see coming down the pipe, we talked about cyber. I've attended some conferences and dealt with some professionals, and some of the things that they tell me about what's actually going on in terms of cyber problems is just absolutely frightening. They suggest to me that certain government agencies are already aware that foreign governments and criminal interests have hacked into some companies. Not so much to do anything right now, but they're leaving malware in the system that they can access at a later time, and that the government knows that this has been done, but they refuse to inform the company that it's been done because they're wanting to watch what happens and see where these foreign governments or these criminal organizations, what they're trying to accomplish. I wish I thought that was not true, because it's really frightening to think that the government's if that's true, they're allowing that to happen. But I'm hearing it from enough sources of people that I trust that I believe it probably is true, at least to some extent. So cybersecurity is a problem. We also have a lot of facilities scattered around all through South Carolina, North Carolina. We have these pressure stations and other kinds of places. So the opportunity for somebody to infiltrate, to break a lock, get through a door, go over a fence, is an issue. And we've had a few of those kinds of attacks recently, some of which we have been able to thwart and some of which we didn't find until after they were over with.
Isn't much of that security issue from within, internal?
We do have occasionally, the biggest instance of it being internal is a disgruntled employee who's been let go and you didn't get all the keys or something along the line, and they come back and want to do something ugly. And that does happen from time to time, for sure. We have some issues we're concerned about our workforce. Well, we've got some aging workforce, and we're concerned about replacing that talent. We've got some very specific people that are really, really good at what they do, but they've got a lot of stuff up here, and when they leave, it's going with them. So we're in the process with those people in particular, trying to figure out how do you offload that information? How do you get it into a manual or into another head, or what do you do to conserve that all that knowledge and make sure that you can carry it forward? We're concerned. One of the things, the emergency response time. We service we do service part of Trousdale County, I guess. So we service that area all the way out of our operations center, which is by the airport in Nashville. Well, if you have an emergency out there, it's going to take a while to get there. It doesn't make economic sense for us to station people out there for emergencies because they happen so infrequently. But we recognize that there is a risk associated with not having somebody that in that proximity. So we're dealing with that, not just there, but in other places as well. And regulatory risk, we're concerned always about our ability to continue to receive the return on equity that we should. Sometimes when rate cases go before utility commissions, lots of things can influence what the utility commission wants to do. Something negative in the press could be detrimental to a rate case. An election could be detrimental to a rate case. So you always want to be cognizant of all those kinds of things and be trying to prepare for it. Sandy, let's see what's next. Here's one of those issues. Our overall risk assessment as of this third quarter in 15, and I circled here because from here down is what the metrics, what the quantitative portion of our process has told us. But when the risk advisory team got together and the executive management team got together, they said, we think that risk is actually understated a bit. We think it's slightly higher than the numbers tell us. And so they sort of put an addition onto into that risk. And so here what we're looking at is not only what is our risk appetite, but what has it been the prior quarter and what is it now and what direction is it moving. And you can see that in market risk. We thought the market risk actually went up in the third quarter and the financial risk went up in the third quarter. But they were still within our risk appetite. The one that got out of balance on us in particular was the operational risk. That's why you see that bar is above the 1 and it is in yellow. Because it calls, as the chairman of that committee, it calls my attention to it. And that's the place where we will kind of dive back. Now, when we get this sheet here, one of the things that the team does for us is they go behind that, and any risk, any quantitative risk that's included in any of these that moves, whether it's in whatever direction it moves, they're going to give us more information about that one. We've got over 100 of these altogether, so I don't want to take the time to go through everything that's staying the same. If everything is status quo, I'm okay with that. But if it's moving positively, I want to know why it's moving positively and what can we do about it to enhance that. And if it's moving negatively, I want to know that too. And where can we go with that? So you can see, we look at what's our appetite, what was it, and what is it this quarter as it moves along. Let's see the next one.
Now, are these, is this based on any model that's out there, or did you all?
It's a model we
create-
developed.
You developed
It's
it?
our own model.
And is this publicized to the shareholders?
Yes. Hundreds of hours of our folks' times. So our subjective appraisal, we increased it. It was basically consistent with the last quarter, but as you can see, part of the issue was we said that the upper appraisal was due to the slight delay that we're having with the pipelines that we were talking about, Constitution Pipeline and the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. We didn't feel like there were any adjustments necessary for any of the others. So this again, we go back each time to the definition. We know we're all talking about the same thing. We know what our appetite statement is. And so then we start looking at the assessment measures, specific measurements that we're going to use. And here, there's a total of 9 of them. The STR stands for strategic. And so we got strategic 1 through strategic 9. 1 and 2 have to do with the income percentage we get from regulated utilities. We want to maintain a certain percentage, but we don't want it to be too high. We are what's called an LDC, a local distribution company. That's what we primarily do. So we don't want to get out of balance high with our non-regulated utility investments. We were talking about rebalancing a portfolio, stock portfolio. That's kind of what we're doing here. We're looking at what we want that balance to be and making sure that we stay within it. Our joint venture portfolio weighting system, what is our price earnings ratio? What's the problem with the price earnings ratio?
As the price goes up.
Yeah, the price part, you don't really have as much control over. You may have a little on the earnings side, but PE ratio can move around on you, and the yield ratio is even worse. You know? One of the things that's important to our stockholders is dividend yield. But as the stock market improves, and we're paying the same dividend, even though we've been kind of growing dividends, we're paying the same dividend, all of a sudden the yield number starts falling on us. And so the investors, our stockholders, go, wait a minute, I'm not getting the same dividend yield, but you're getting the same amount of money. Okay? And your stock price is up. We can keep your stock price down and make your yield better. What would you like? What would you like? You want the stock price up, you want the yield up?
I want the yield up.
You want both if you can get it, but you're probably not. So there is a balancing act that goes on there. And then the utility return on equity and the joint venture return on equity. So those are the kinds of things that go into this strategic risk. Let's see the next one. And so there is turnover on the right-hand side is some proprietary information, which is why it's not there. But these then are the kind of risks, the metric, the description of it. So for example, strategic 1, percentage of pre-tax income that comes from the utility. And it's there because our metric monitors our alignment as a pure play local distribution company identity. So they have gone through and said, here's what we're going to measure, here's how we're going to measure it, and here's why we're measuring it. Here's how we see it as a part of our risk. Okay. And so that's done for all of those, for all 9 of them. And it's done for every category as well. Okay, so here you see we're in pretty good shape, except we have a yellow bar here. Income from the regulated JVs. Well, the income from the regulated JVs changed on us in that quarter. We had, I don't remember exactly which one of them changed dramatically, but one of them changed on us, and so we had to go back and look at that, see what was changing, and make sure that we understood why it changed. The number doesn't tell you what, it tells you go look. It gives you the question to ask. And so behind that is this metric. This is the same thing, but now instead of just looking at 2 quarters, we're looking at it over this period of time. If it's in the green, we're okay. If it's in the yellow, it's a caution. If it's in the red, we call these guardrails. If you hit the guardrail, you want to know why in particular. So we had a period of time here. It's been mostly in the yellow. It's been a little problematic. Got okay for 1 quarter, and now it's been back. And the primary, it's in the yellow, and it went down a little bit. So we went back and measured it, look at it, see what was going on with it. So there's a very quantitative assessment with that. Financial risk, same kind of thing. A whole set of assessment measures. What's our short-term liquidity? What's our debt to total capital? Long-term debt to total capital, funds from operation available to average total debt, interest coverage ratio, dividend payout. So we're looking at all those ratios that you've been calculating, or types of those that you've been calculating for all these years, thinking they were ridiculous and nobody used them. We use them. The CFO uses them substantially. And we follow that with the same kind of graphs. Risk measurements, what we measure and why we measure it in each case, and then the same kind of graphs that go with that. Let me look at the package here. I think I want to move forward. That's kind of more of the same. Let's see where we can. Go here first, Sandy, just one page, and then I want to go after that. We'll go to here for a page, and then we'll be questions. All right, so we go through all of that. We look at the ones that have changed, but in addition to that, they give me this package, which is every one of the measurements that we take in this chart, or a chart on each one of them for the last several quarters, in this case since we started actually quantifying this stuff, so that I have a full package of seeing where it is. They draw my attention. You remember you talk about dashboards? The first part of our package is the dashboard. It's the stuff that you look at and you say, are we going in the right direction? Are we going fast enough? Are we going slow enough? They give me that. But then they give me this package that has all of these metrics in it. And I'm responsible to look at them and make sure that I'm still comfortable with them. But I look primarily first at that dashboard package. But this is just a complete package. Let's see the last one, Sandy, please. And in each year when we file our 10K, part of what you have to talk about in the 10K are the risks associated with the company. And what you think about those risks, where they come from, and so forth. And so we have to go through and identify those risks, and then we have to tell why that risk exists, what we're doing about it, and so forth. And so there is also a package that goes along with the 10K that is specific to it. So all the stuff that we have done before feeds into this, but there is, in addition to that, a very specific process that goes with the 10K. Yes, sir?
What does the 10K stand for?
I'm sorry?
What is the 10K?
10K is the annual filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Okay.
Your annual reports, all that sort of thing.
Kimberly, you probably know about that.
Oh, yeah.
She does that for.
Quarterlies are 8Ks.
10 Qs.
10 Qs, the Qs, yes. Yeah, that's why it was a Q.
And who helps put that together?
Well, this piece is pretty much all the executive management team, but it also comes through the audit committee. And unfortunately, I'm on the audit committee. I get both of them. Questions? About boards in general, about this board, about this operation?
You as a board member, you get a lot of information given to you.
Yes.
Ultimately, you're responsible for
Yes.
forwarding. Do you ever go personally to facilities to verify information or to,
Great question. Yes, we do. And we're scattered all over everywhere. So Can you be everywhere you would like to be? And the answer to that is no. But yes, we do. And one of the nice things is we've made it a point to have board members from different geographies of the company, so that we have people close by who can watch us. Mr. Garfield from Bridgestone and I our primary responsibility for watching that sort of stuff, what's going on is the Nashville area. We've got people living in South Carolina, North Carolina, and different places that they can watch over them. And one of the things we've talked about is a more systematic way of doing that, of getting more into those field situations that they can look at. And one of the things we have greatly encouraged the executive management team to do, and they do a good job, is to get out of Charlotte and get on the road and go visit those facilities. Because if nothing else, that helps to set the tone. They understand what the tone at the top really is when they meet the people who have to do that. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned identifying emerging risks such as cybersecurity. Does anyone on the board have expertise in that field or information security?
If I were to identify one place where we could use some additional help, that would be it. Now, I would say that probably, that same statement applies to 99% of all boards. But yeah, we could absolutely use some more expertise at that level looking at that. But I will tell you, every board meeting, we are all over it because everybody is concerned about it.
Do you feel like your industry is at greater risk from cyber threats internationally because of the shutting down the system?
I think the electric grid is at greater risk than we are. I think they can do more damage faster if somebody chooses to do that with the electric grid than they would with the gas, because everybody's got electricity. Not everybody has gas. You can probably exist reasonably comfortably longer without gas than you can without electricity. So I think that's where the greater risk of the utility business is. That's not to say we're not at risk, we are. And somebody can certainly make some loud noises if they chose to do certain things to our facilities. Yes, sir.
So that, there was that slide on joint venture risks where it was like a fault line. You referred to it as the guardrail area where you wanted to be in. Was that overall risk assessment of that plot line?
Well, every one of them has sort of guardrails on it where you're between the yellow, you want to stay in the green and where we know those risks are. So we kind of look at where we want to be and where we want to stay. I don't know that specific slide. I don't remember.
I just saw an area where that trend line bumped into the green and
Yeah, and sometimes it went up into the green and came back down into the yellow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that one quarter was a good quarter, but we know there's a long-term issue that we need to deal with. Now, one of the things that companies sometime in the past would have done to make things better is they would have changed their risk appetite and moved it so that the numbers were in the green.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that didn't solve the problem. That just changed the optics of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to do that. We recognize that this is still an issue, and so we're going to stay with it until we figure out how to get better.
So you said that brought up a long-term thing that you had to look at when you got back down from it?
This tells us that, yeah, we've got an issue here long-term, and if we're going to operate up here, then we have to look at how we balance that portfolio. And that's do we get in more joint ventures? Do we change the kind of joint ventures we're in? What is it going to help us to stay in the green and still make money?
And speaking of that, what kind of are you industry specific when you're going with these joint ventures, or are you doing
we are in the utilities business. We're in gas transmission, either long distance transmission pipelines, or we're in home services.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You went from really low, so 36%, all the way up to the next quarter at 54%. Was there some kind of adjustment that was made in between those two quarters, or was it just kind of the market?
Yeah, no, I think that's one of those cases where sometimes you've got to go back and see what blipped in the data. And sometimes that's what it is, it's a blip in the data, either a mistake or whatever. I don't know specifically what caused that great jump, but there was some precipitating cause there, and when was that, back fourth quarter of 14, so I'm too old to remember a year ago. I do recall that there were questions about, wait a minute, what happened here? That's a lot of change in a short period of time. And the team came back and said, well, here's kind of why that number changed.
Could it be a change in the partner when you talk
Could
about the cell?
have been a, 2014. I think what happened was there was a sale of a part of a joint venture. And because of that sale, those numbers changed dramatically. So they were, it's sort of an extraordinary item on the financial statement. I believe that's what happened there. Other questions? Being on a board is more fun than you can imagine, and more work, and scary. All of the above. But the people I deal with are great people. They are very, very conscientious of what they do. They are very concerned about the company and about the stockholders. They're just outstanding folks all the way around. The management team has been good the whole time I've been on there, and it consistently gets better. So we're really happy about that. I've served on a lot of not-for-profit boards and small company boards and other things. Piedmont has been a lot of fun, but most of them have been fun. I've had rare exceptions where something didn't fit quite right, but not much.
Dr. Burton, many of these students are going into public accounting and many auditing. Raise your hand if that's your career path.
Bless your heart.
See, so it might take, if you don't mind, just a couple of minutes on the audit committee. You're also on that. That would be of interest to them.
The audit committee, as I said, Vicki McElreed, who's a former partner with PricewaterhouseCoopers, retired now, chairs that committee and does a great job. And then Frank Holding, who is the president and CEO of the bank, is on the committee. And I think I believe Minor is the other member of that committee, and myself. Before we separated out the Enterprise Risk Management Committee, the Audit Committee sort of felt like it had all of that responsibility too, because we were responsible for making sure nothing goes wrong and doesn't hit the financial statements. So I think the Audit Committee was really thrilled to have an Enterprise Risk Management Committee take off some of that responsibility. Now, they still have all the responsibilities designated by Sarbanes-Oxley. None of that goes away. We have the internal audit folks who report to us directly. We basically hire and fire the internal audit. We hire and fire the auditors. But they have do a really good job for us. The audit committee, we get all of the statements, the SEC filings, and we have to approve those filings before they go in. And that is the most tedious process you can imagine. I mean, it is a word by word, number by number examination of everything. Our folks, our team that puts them together does a miraculous job. They are really, really good and conscientious. Part of the problem is one of those folks is leaving us. And we don't really have somebody right in line to take her place that will be as good as she's been. That's frightening. But we have to go through all of that, and then we get reports from the Enterprise Risk Management Committee, we get reports from the Cyber Committee, we get reports from the Cyber team. All of those folks talking about risk. We get, anytime there's an issue with budgets or whatever, then it comes to the Audit Committee. Vicki spends inordinate amounts of time doing that responsibility. Let me address whatever questions you have about that.
Any
No
others?
questions? Everybody's okay with the Audit Committee? If you get on the board, you have a choice, do something besides audit. It is by far the hardest work. By far the hardest work on the board. Our committee meetings are generally 4 hours. And the other committee meetings are generally 1 hour. Maybe an hour and a half. So, the amount of, and that doesn't even presume the preparation time to do that. That's just the committee meetings instead of. Okay?
Well, I thank you so much. I think this has been very helpful. Thank you.
I'm sorry, y'all have to stay.
Well, they're gonna get to take a break, so how about that? So you guys take about 5 minutes and we will reconvene.
Okay. You ready to
I don't think that she ever
do
started
everything you
it.
needed?
I do. You know what, I don't think it started. Hang on just. No,
You never started?
I don't think it ever started. I don't think it again.
That happens.
I don't see how it started. Yep. Oh, well.
Oh, well, good try.
Good try. It was great. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thanks.
What year?
You're from Raleigh?
Yeah, originally. You said Piedmont, what year?
You probably go first to the bank, too.
Oh, that's too bad. That was such a great talk. Wait.
As a shareholder.